Hello, I'm Emma Sutcliffe, SVP and Standards Officer at PCI Security Standards Council, and this is Questions with the Council. The first question I have today comes from an email that we received from one of our participating organisations, and they ask, is it already known when the standard of PCI DSS version 4 will be available in German? Well, I'm very pleased to say that we have published the standard in a number of different languages. It is, of course, a global standard, so it's very important to us that the standard does have reach across the globe and across all the continents. So you can now find the standard in German and French, as well as Portuguese, Spanish, Chinese, and Japanese on our website. We also have dedicated microsites for these languages, and on those sites there are other documents that you can find as well, including the self-assessment questionnaires. So do go there and see, hopefully your language will be there. The next question is from one of my colleagues was presenting at an event, and this question came from someone in the audience at that event. This question is, what would be the first steps for you that I would advise organisations to take as they embark on transitioning from PCI DSS version 3.2.1 to version 4? Well, my first piece of advice is not to put it off. Don't wait to start that transition. It's very important to begin now because there's a lot of new things in the standard. There's a lot of new information in the standard that will be helpful for you, and so it's very important that you start familiarising yourself with this new information. There are also some new requirements that you'll need to be aware of, but the Council has also provided a lot of guidance to help you with this. The best place to start, I would recommend, is the Summary of Changes document. This document goes through in detail all of the changes in the standard, and it also has a complete list of those new requirements, and it also identifies the effective dates of those new requirements, so that is a really helpful resource. Another thing I'd suggest that you look at first is the glossary. For PCI DSS version 4, we actually moved the glossary into the standard as an appendix, so you can find descriptions and definitions of all the terms and all the abbreviations that are used in the standard right at the back there in that glossary. It's Appendix G for glossary. So there are two very good places to start to really help you familiarise yourself with what's new and to help understand how that will apply to your organisation. Our next question is from one of our internal security assessors, and they ask, why is PCI DSS version 4 more stringent for multi-factor authentication? Well, multi-factor authentication is widely recognised as a critical security control in the protection of data. And in PCI DSS version 4, we have expanded the multi-factor authentication requirements to apply to all access into the cardholder data environment. Now, this is one of the new requirements that is currently a best practice, but it will come into effect as a new requirement in 2025. There are also some new requirements around the protection of the multi-factor authentication system itself. It's very important that the integrity of that multi-factor authentication system is maintained, and that helps ensure, as I said, that that data is well protected. So do make sure that you're aware of those. Okay, next question. This one came in from one of our QSAs, our qualified security assessors, during one of the assessor webinars that we held. And this question is, could you cover the 3.2.1 to 4 transition timeline again, please? I want to ensure that I have the timelines correct. Well, the timeline is published on our website, so first of all, I'd certainly recommend go have a look at our blog, the PCI Perspectives blog. That is a really good place to find up-to-date information on PCI DSS, including the timeline. The two key dates that you really need to know are March the 31st, 2024, which is when the previous version of the standard, which is version 3.2.1, will be retired. And the second key date you need to know is March the 31st, 2025, which is when those requirements that were added as best practices will become effective as requirements. So from March the 31st, 2025, they will be part of the standard and will be included in all assessments going forward. So they're the two key dates for you. But again, go to the blog and you can see the full timeline for when the standard was released onwards. Okay, so next question. This is another question that came in after a colleague's presentation. We are in the implementation stage of PCI DSS version 3.2.1. Knowing that 4.0 is now available, when will this version be applicable to us? Well, we just went through the timeline, so the important date to remember again was March the 31st, 2024. At that point, that is when version 3.2.1 of the standard will be retired, and PCI DSS version 4 will become the only active version that's supported by the Council after that time. So from that perspective, that would be the effective date for version 4 across the board. Now, if you do have any questions about your own particular implementation or your own particular compliance obligations, that's where I'd certainly recommend you reach out to your acquirer or your payment brand, whoever it is that you report your compliance to, and they can certainly help you understand any timelines they might have on when PCI DSS version 4 will apply to your organisation. This one is another one from one of our webinars. The new standard lists several requirements as best practices, effective with the release of the standard. How should organisations look at beginning to implement these practices while still focusing on their 3.2.1 security implementations? Well, this is where the timeline is very critical to keep in mind. Those best practices, as I mentioned, will become effective requirements in 2025. But don't put that off. Don't feel like you have a lot of time to get there, because 2025 will be here before you know it. So it is very important to start looking at those best practices now and how you're going to implement them. And this is where working with qualified assessors, qualified professionals can really help you as well. We do have transition training for our assessor community, our QSAs and ISAs. So you can look on the website to find a QSA who has completed the version 4 transition training. If you have internal security assessors, the ISA qualification, there is training available for those as well, so that you can make sure that your people have the latest information about version 4. I'd also suggest that you look at doing some gap assessments in your environment. This is a really useful tool so that you can understand what your current controls are and any gaps that you have to the new requirements that will be coming up in 2025. And this will really help you implement what you need to there. Well, that was our last question. I'd like to thank all of our stakeholders who did submit these questions. We really appreciate hearing what your questions are and any feedback you have on the standard. And do remember, we have a dedicated PCI DSS version 4 resource hub, which you can find on our PCI Perspectives blog on our website. Thank you again for all your feedback.